This season of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast is proudly supported by My Music Staff.
Welcome to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast, the place where teachers from around the world meet to share innovative ideas about music education. Listen and learn as we help you motivate your students, grow your income, expand your studio, and become a more creative piano teacher.
Hi everyone, and welcome back again to episode number 154 of the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. This is season 1, 2019, and my name is Tim Topham, your host for the show, and a big special welcome to my Inner Circle Piano Teaching community members. This show is your home for inspiration, ideas, business, and teaching strategies to help support your teaching and grow your studio. In today's show, we're unpacking answers to your legal questions. I reached out to all my community members and contacts on Facebook and asked what questions they would like answered by an attorney. And so we're putting those questions today to our special guest and getting some fantastically helpful answers. And I know many of these questions I've been asked by teachers, and so it was great to finally get a specialist on the show with the training who can actually provide the kind of advice that we really do need. What I would say, of course, and my guest today does explain this at the beginning, legal advice is incredibly important, and while we are answering some questions and giving you ideas here, please do get your own legal advice if you do have questions like this from a qualified lawyer or attorney. It really doesn't pay to take shortcuts in this kind of area. Today's show notes and full transcripts are now available at timtopham.com/episode 154. My guest today is an internet business lawyer in San Diego with 26 years of experience. He advises online businesses on how best to comply with laws and regulations in areas such as e-commerce and privacy, while helping clients minimize their chances of being sued when operating online. He is a massive hockey fan and avid traveler, having lived in such exotic locations as Siberia. He's been writing the great Australian novel for the last 20 years and has finally settled on his first sentence. Welcome to the show, Richard Chapo.
Thank you for having me on.
It's been an absolute pleasure because you've actually helped me with a few of my legal questions. So I thought it was a great opportunity to get you on the podcast to answer some of my listeners' questions. And I've reached out and I've got a whole lot of them that I hope you'll be able to give some clarity to. But tell us just a quick little bit about where you're based and what you do.
Sure. So I'm in San Diego, California. I've been practicing law for about 30 years or so, actually a little bit longer than that, but since about 1999, I've been practicing in the internet law field. So I got into it pretty early when a lot of things were just developing. I'd actually been living in Russia of all places and came back, and I had a friend who was a CEO of an internet company, and around that time, as long as you got a website, you could get venture funding, and everybody was clueless, and it was just a complete catastrophe. But it was definitely funny to be in on the bottom floor. And so, since about 2003, I've really focused on working with small businesses. I used to work with large corporations, and if I have another corporate meeting, I may kill somebody. So my focus has really been on small businesses, and that's much more enjoyable. My practice is really devoted to trying to be proactive with them, trying to keep them out of trouble, so that they can work on growing and hopefully not work on defending lawsuits and things of that sort. So that's kind of the direction, and been doing it since then.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm sure as a lawyer, you probably need to give some kind of disclaimer before we start answering these questions. Shall I hand that over to you?
Certainly. So as a disclaimer, the information provided today is educational in purpose, is not legal advice for your specific situation, is not intended as an offer of legal services. And actually, beyond that waiver, I have an idea of what some of the questions may be. It's important to recognize that I am in the U.S. I am a California attorney. So if we're talking about laws in other areas, the EU, places of that sort, you need to keep that in mind. You always want to talk to local counsel so you know what's specific to that particular area.
Right. And basically, I think what Richard is saying is take what we say as thought and go and get your own legal advice where required. Would that be right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, let's jump into the questions. So I asked my Inner Circle members what questions they had and also posted on Facebook, and we've got quite a few to get through. So the first one's from Rebecca, and she says, and I think this is a good one to start with, what legal questions should I be asking when setting up an online course for sale? She's just getting started, and none of the resources I'm learning from, so she's obviously taking some courses online, mention anything about the legal side of things. Does there need to be some kind of terms and agreements page when someone buys one of my online courses? What else should I know that I haven't even thought of?
Yes, there does need to be terms and conditions. So terms and conditions are, I know people are starting businesses and they view them as one of those horrible things they have to deal with, but they're there to help you. So your terms and conditions are going to set forth things like payments, refunds, how these kinds of issues are going to be dealt with. And you do need terms and conditions. Certainly if you're in the United States, you need to have a checkbox agreement. So when somebody makes the purchase, they actually check a box saying, yes, I agree to the terms and conditions and privacy policy. And that's going to lock them into the terms. Now, the terms are important because particularly, there can be even just very basic things about them, like a choice of form provision. And so what that is if we think about the internet, the beauty of it is it's worldwide. But the downside from a legal perspective is it's worldwide. So if you're perhaps in, I don't know, Florida or somewhere of that sort, you sell your course, somebody pursues it, something negative happens, they want to sue you. Well, and if they're in Seattle, are you going to have to go to Seattle to defend that? These kinds of issues. Well, in your terms, you can include language that says basically if legal dispute arises, it's going to be in wherever your hometown is, these kinds of things. In addition to that, privacy policies, you have to have them now. We're going through kind of World War III actually right now online. Most people don't realize it or know, but we are having a massive brawl between countries and jurisdictions over the concept of privacy. Mm-hmm. So in a country like the U.S., privacy here is it's kind of a joke. There's no national.
When you compare it to the EU, who've done a complete crackdown, haven't they, with the what's it called, GDPR?
Yes, exactly. The EU is, really creating these rules and regulations that are, they're draconian. I'll give you an example. There was a case this past month in Austria where they fined a gentleman who put up a surveillance camera in front of his store on the street, and they fined him. It was only like $8,000, but they went after him because he was filming too much of the street, and apparently they felt that people needed to be notified of that.
Oh my goodness.
Which raises a lot of questions on how do you notify them. It's also humorous because the government, of course, uses surveillance cameras everywhere and nobody says a thing. But so the GDPR is definitely, it's very, very brutal. So if you are selling goods or offering services, even if for free, into Europe, the GDPR is something you need to focus on. And where you need to think about this, and particularly with courses, a lot of time when you're selling courses, you're trying to generate mailing lists. Well, if you're mailing lists, you're sending out an email to somebody in the EU that's offering your service or trying to tout your service or getting them to buy your course, whatever it is. Are you not offering them goods and services? And so therefore, don't you have to comply with the GDPR at that point? And inquiring minds want to know at this point. There's a lot of issues there.
Yeah, we went through a whole change when that came out as well. So I did a lot of reading. I watched videos with specialists and things like that. And we had to change the language on all our email opt-in forms to make it more explicit what was going to happen. And to be honest, I actually think that's a good thing because I know that many people listening, and you and I probably both have given our email to something to only be bombarded with things we didn't want. So I actually think that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, I think that the purpose of the GDPR is definitely going in the right direction. I think the actual regulation itself is really poorly written. Questions were put to people who are on the Article 29 working party. They're the group that drafted it, and they couldn't answer the questions. Mm-hmm. So how are businesses supposed to answer the questions?
Yeah, that's a problem. For those outside of the EU, GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, I think, or something like that.
Yes.
That's a law that came out, it was about middle of last year, in regard to what you have to do if you have a website that sells or shares any data with people in the EU zone. So for those of you perhaps in the United States or in Australia who only operate studios in your own location, you actually don't need to worry, I don't think, at this stage.
Yeah, you just, you need to keep an eye on your mailing list, to be honest with you, and try to shed anybody that's located in the EU. The interesting thing about the regulation is it's not citizens of the EU. It's people located in the EU.
Just to make it more complicated.
Just to make it more complicated. So, for instance, one of the questions that was put to somebody in the Article 29 Working Party was, okay, well, what if I have a person in Germany who comes to San Diego on vacation? And then can I collect their information at my shop? And then what happens if they go back to Germany? Can I email them? And you got this long, convoluted answer, and no, it was a mess. The bigger thing to take of it is if if that is an issue, if you are working with the European crowd, you definitely want to know what the GDPR is and make sure you comply. With a course, the other issues that you're going to have are copyright. How's the course being created? Who's creating the text, the videos, whatever it may be, and do you own the copyright to that, or in some cases, do you just have a license to it? You just want to make sure that you have some control aspect there. On the internet these days, controls everything. You don't want to give other people control, because if they have control, then they can take steps that can really hurt you. So you're going to check on that. You might want to trademark it. It just kind of depends on how big of a market you think you're going to hit. So if you're doing really well and you're expecting tens of thousands of sales, then trademark it, because people are going to try to steal it. And while everybody screams copyright, trademark is a much more effective way to go after people. It's a much stronger basis. Copyright on the internet is kind of a mess. It's just all over the place, and trying to actually prove copyright damages can be difficult. But with the trademark, it's much easier. So you want to look at that. And then I think that's probably about it. One thing you are going to have to realize, particularly if you have a course, is people are going to steal it. They just are. And you're going to get angry. Yep. and then you're going to start spending time trying to go after those people, either through the DMCA or whatever other mechanisms you can think of. And at some point, you're going to have to make a business decision about how much time you want to spend doing that versus getting on with your life. And that sounds unfortunate. And as a lawyer, I'd love to tell you, let's sue everybody. And, if you've got $50 million, then great, let's go for it. But, most people aren't in that position. So it is something you're going to have to just kind of learn to deal with.
Now, you mentioned the DMCA. I might come back to that one because I don't want to get bogged down in acronyms at this stage. So I'm going to go to another question from Priantha, who's in the US. He says, here in the US, is my homeowner's insurance enough to cover possible liabilities connected with teaching out of my home?
Typically not. Now, your policy, some policies will cover that, some will not. We've seen them actually backing off of that coverage before it was added, just kind of as an incidental benefit. A lot of insurance policies, when they try to sell them, they'll put things in there that realistically are probably never going to happen in your life. But then they tell you, hey, see, you live in San Diego, but, if you get hit by a tornado, you got coverage. Well, we haven't had a tornado in San Diego and, I don't even know how long. And so that was kind of an addition. But now so many people work from home and they're running internet businesses that you're seeing policies pull back on this. The other thing that they will do is maybe they give you coverage, but the coverage is actually pretty low. So like $50,000 kind of a thing. And so that's not really going to benefit you. So the really unfortunate news is you're going to have to actually read your insurance policy. And that's, yes, I know, millions of people groan at once.
Yep. Could they make the font any smaller? Could they make the language any harder to read?
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to read the coverage area. Don't read the front. They give you a little summary page there. That little summary page doesn't really mean anything. You need to go in and actually read the policy. You particularly want to look at a section called exclusions. And the exclusions are going to say, we cover you for everything, but, and then it's, 84 different subclauses of things. And so you want to go through there and look and see, if there's anything there. Now, the beauty of it is you can contact insurance companies now, particularly insurance brokers are probably better, and they can get you coverage. So it's something that people now recognize. The insurance industry is much like the legal industry. We tend to be about 10 years behind times, but they've caught up, and so you should be able to get policies for it, but you need to go out and probably seek them.
Right. Yep. Good advice. Okay. Next question. I had another question about insurance, actually. This teacher has teachers who she subcontracts that travel to students' homes. I've put in their contract that they are responsible for providing their own public liability insurance. When teaching at my studio, they are covered by my studio's liability insurance, but they won't be covered when teaching at a different location. So my question is it enough to cover myself to have it in their contract that they must supply their own insurance? If they don't get it for whatever reason and something happens while they're teaching, is it on them, or am I still partially liable as the contractor? If so, how can I protect myself? I am a sole trader, not a company. Would this have any bearing on the issue?
Okay, so I'm going to add, this is one of those caveat situations. I don't know the law in the EU or in Australia and the US. If they agree to provide insurance in the contract that they sign with you, that's wonderful and all. But if they don't go buy it, unless they have a lot of assets, you're on the hook. Because if I understand the question correctly, it's essentially your business. They're coming out as an independent contractor or maybe even an employee performing the actual services. Well, that customer is going to look to you, and the courts are going to look to you. And the fact that you were a sole proprietor versus being an official company, that would probably be worse because now your personal assets are exposed. So depending on where you're at, where you live, maybe going and forming an LLC or something of that sort would be, advisable, because at that point, then you're creating a shield between your personal assets and the business. You may even potentially want to expand your insurance. A lot of insurance will carry what are called subsidiary provisions or extra coverage provisions. And they will say, basically, we're going to cover you as a business, but we'll also cover your independent contractors, your employees who go out and act on your behalf. Unfortunately, again, you actually have to actually read your policy and see what it says.
I think you're going to be saying that a bit today.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of the name of the game with insurance these days. But regardless, those are two ways to deal with it. But I definitely wouldn't just rely on that contract because, again, if they don't go get the insurance, a lawsuit happens, and they turn around to you and go, "I've got $500." Well, now you've got a problem. You may have a problem with your insurance as well, because if your insurance is providing coverage for them when they're working in your studio, but when they're not, and if they're not in this case, there may be an exclusion for that, and so your insurance may not even cover it.
Oh, so even if they do come after you, you won't be covered by your own insurance.
Right.
I see. Yeah. So I guess it would be best for an employer or a contractor to cite the insurance policies of their contractors if that is requested in the contract with them.
I make them hand the policy over.
Right. Okay. So that's really helpful for people, I'm sure. So make sure if you ask them to do something that you check that they have done it, because it might come back on you. That's great. I want to. You've kind of mentioned company structures there. So we got a question from Valerie who said pros and cons of LLC, which in Australia we call proprietary limited companies, versus sole proprietorships. And I think you mentioned protection of assets. So can you just tell our teachers listening what the difference is and what you think they should do? Maybe it depends on their size. I don't know.
Well, generally, so if you just start up a business and you're tutoring, students, you're automatically going to be designated as a sole proprietorship. It may have different names depending on the country you're in, but basically you're on your own. And in that situation, the problem is you're personally liable for any of the business's debts. And that can be lawsuits, but it can also be, if you run up credit cards or something of that sort. If you go ahead and form an LLC, which, in the U.S., limited liability company, it's going to create essentially a wall, if you will, between your personal assets and the business. So the LLC, there was a joke in the U.S. a number of president elections ago. Mitt Romney was running, and he said, "Corporations are people." And he just got mocked endlessly for it. But he was actually right. Under the law, they are. So an LLC or corporation, from a legal perspective, is considered a separate person.
Right.
So as long as you're not commingling your personal assets, as long as that entity is not paying for your dry cleaning or something like that, you're treating it like a separate business. If it gets sued, the party suing that business can't come through to you.
Got it. So it gives you that distance and a bit of protection.
Right. Now, however, and this is U.S. based, so I'm not sure if it's the same in Australia or in the EU, but if you have an LLC and you're the only owner, you're called a member, and you go out and do something, the LLC really isn't going to protect you because you're the one that's committing the act. I give the following example. You have a store. You sell electronic gadgets. Somebody comes in, tries to return something. They're extremely annoying. One of your employees slaps them. Okay. Well, the LLC is going to protect you because it's that business entity. It puts that shield there. You didn't do anything, so you're fine. Now, the company might get sued, and the company may have to settle. But you personally, your home, your car, your savings, whatever, is not going to be exposed. Now, if we take the same situation, you walk over, the person gives you the middle finger, you slap them. Well, the LLC really isn't going to protect you because you're the one that actually slapped them. It doesn't matter if you have an LLC.
I see. Yeah.
Now, as your attorney, I would argue that it does, and I would say you were doing it as you were slapping them as an employee, and I'd make these arguments. But you're probably going to run into problems there. So in a situation where you're teaching students, you have to be a little careful. If we go back to our previous situation, though, where the one was bringing, other teachers in, in that situation, the LLC would be very beneficial, because if that teacher does something that gives rise to a lawsuit or damage claim or what have you, the LLC is going to protect you. But if you as the teacher actually did it, then it probably is not.
Great. So for those of you who are hiring other teachers and you don't have an LLC or company structure, then maybe that's something to consider for that protection level. But perhaps when they're just starting out, the sole proprietorship perhaps makes sense at the beginning at least. But I think what you're saying, what I'm hearing anyway, is that regardless of your size, having an LLC or a company does provide a bit more protection in the case of a lawsuit.
It does. Let me just add one quick thing. So LLCs and business entities, corporations, S corps, whatever they are, at least in the states, they're controlled at the state level, not at the federal level. There is no federal law for LLCs. So you really need to talk to somebody local, because the laws in Arizona may be different than the laws in California and the laws in New York. Everybody treats these differently.
Right. Okay.
And sometimes significantly differently. So.
Okay, cool. All right, now Becky, a lot of people know Ms. Becky. She's a very popular person online in the piano field. She says, and this relates to 2 questions ago, please cover the difference between independent contractors and employees.
Oh, Becky. Oh, things are going so well.
If you could do it in like 1 minute. No.
Yeah. So at least in the US,
this does come up a lot when teachers look to start hiring other teachers.
No, I can understand. So in the U.S., basically, you want to classify everybody as an independent contractor, because then your burdens financially are much, much easier. You don't have to, pay employment taxes and things of this sort. The IRS, the federal tax agency here, of course, wants to classify everybody as an employee, because they're going to get more tax money out of it. They'll be sure to get everything that they think they're due. And so there's this grand debate about how do you address this issue. There's a 20-factor test. I'll just send you a link. You can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that'd be great.
Shows different things they look at. I'll just give you some so you can get an idea. Basically, the overall issue here is we're talking about control. How much control does the business have over that person? The more control you have, the more likely they're an employee. The less control that you exhibit, the more likely they are not. So some of the factors would include the level of instruction you give them, the amount of training, the extent of personal services, continuity of relationship. If they're with you for 4 years straight and they're an independent contractor, you're trying to classify them that way, you're going to have a problem. Because if they're with you for 4 years straight, particularly if you're the only company they're working for, they're an employee.
Right.
They just are.
Yeah.
Demands.
Sorry to interrupt you. That issue of are they working for other people, that would seem to be an important consideration too, because if they're a true contractor, it's likely they're going to work for other people. If they're working for you 100% of the time, then that doesn't seem to fit.
No, absolutely. No, definitely. Do you control their teaching method? How are they paid? Is money put through you? How are you doing different things? Are you paying for their business and travel expenses? It is a difficult question. I think we all know who Uber is, the car transport group. They're going through lawsuits in nearly every state and at the federal level over this issue. Are their drivers independent contractors? Are they employees? And there's no universal answer. There's a lot of screaming and yelling, and a lot of my fine brethren and peers in the legal field are making oodles of money.
I was going to say, very lucrative.
Right.
Yeah.
So look at the list of 20 things, and if you can go down, and I'll send you the link, and go down those, and then try to match up what you're doing versus what the IRS is looking at. The more of those you can eliminate, the better off you are. Some companies, particularly larger companies in the U.S., not in the teaching field, but for instance, in the medical field, they will not hire independent contractors unless those independent contractors form an LLC. Because at that point they can say, hey, it's another business. There's no way you can classify them as an employee. The problem that you have is that if the IRS comes in and says, well, this person is an employee, they're not saying this person is an employee from this point forward. They're saying this person is an employee from when you first started working with them.
I see.
You owe taxes, in arrears, if you will, and penalties, and and it just gets ugly. So, so it's definitely not a pretty area. But look at the list that I'll send over, and then talk to your accountant. And also, a lot of it's what your accountant feels like they can defend.
Right.
Some accountants are, more comfortable with that argument, and some are going to be more conservative. But again, you can always look around and say, "Oh, my accountant told me," just like you can look around and say to people, "Oh, my attorney said," and use that as an excuse. And I mean, we laugh, but that often is a justifiable excuse. With certainly when it comes to penalties and things of that sort. If the IRS was to disagree.
Well, that's why we pay you the big bucks, isn't it, Richard? So that we can say, well, that's what Richard told us. Well, not today, obviously, but if we hired you privately.
Yes. That's, I think half of my worth is, my attorney says I have to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm not the bad guy, but my attorney.
Now, we've got a few questions on studio policies. So if you might not be aware, but I certainly recommend that most teachers have a policy that their parents adhere to, agree to when they sign their child up, which will give, how much they're going to pay and when and all that kind of stuff. So like a terms and conditions, but we often call them studio policies. And so the question from Heidi Marie is, I have studio policies posted on my website and make each family member read and sign that they agree to abide by them. Is there any benefit or protection in doing this?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. When somebody has signed it, unless there's something in there that violates the law per se, they're binding themselves to that. Now, if the student is a child, you need to be a little careful. And it sounds like you already are, in that you're having the parents sign. But children have to be a certain age before their signature is going to mean anything. It's typically 16 or 18, depending on the state or the location. Because they're just not assumed to have the capacity to enter into a contract. And that's what they're doing. That's what, what you're talking about. So yes, no, that absolutely.
Yep. Okay. And is a checkbox okay if it's a digital application, like we see pop up for iTunes and Apple all the time?
Yes, with the caveat that, again, it depends on who's signing. You're actually... this gets into a complicated area that's kind of off point, but you have to take privacy into account.
Right.
So in the United States, we have a law called the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, and it says that if you collect personal information from children under 13 online, then you must first get verified parental consent, and you must jump through a bunch of hoops, and to make sure that you're doing that. So basically, the parents have to be informed. You have to provide them with specific policies, things of this sort. Right. They need to sign them, send them back. The GDPR basically copied that. It's Article 8 in the GDPR, except, and for 4 years, it read the same thing, basically. Under 13, need verified parental consent. In the last version of the GDPR, some fine individual raised the age to under 16.
Right, okay.
And so...
Well, look, I mean, for the most part, this will be parents signing this on behalf of their child having lessons. So, my thinking, I have an online policy which comes to the parent when they are enrolling their child. And at the bottom, I have a tick box. I've read the terms and conditions, which is linked to separately. And then enrollment is agreement that you have read and agreed by these policies.
Right. Yeah. If they're students in the U.S., the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, called COPPA, is something you want to pay attention to. Now, completely off the record, and I'm sure nobody will repeat this anywhere, COPPA is enforced by the Attorney Generals of the various states in the U.S. and by the Federal Trade Commission. And their enforcement levels are, I believe the Latin word is woeful.
Right.
We have like 2 cases a year, and usually it's one where, a drunk executive gets into a car crash and, spreads the personal information of 9 million children across the highway. Really obvious cases. I've never seen a case where, 20 students or something of that sort where they've gone after that. And the reason in their defense is in the U.S. I'm not sure how enforceable the law is under free speech concepts here, but nonetheless, if nothing else, you might do like a Google alert. For COPPA, it's just COPPA. You might actually spell it out, just because otherwise you end up getting a lot of Italian food. Apparently, it's a dish. I don't know.
There you go. I didn't know either.
But if you're in the EU, the GDPR, of course, they're quite militant about enforcement. We're starting to see it all start now. So you want to keep an eye on Article 8. I'm not sure of any states or any countries that have actually issued much in the way of guidance as to how they're going to handle it, but that will be coming. So you want to make sure that you have your I's dotted and T's crossed.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor, My Music Staff. Most of you have already heard about My Music Staff and how their software helps thousands of music teachers manage their businesses more efficiently. They handle all of your student management issues, scheduling, billing, and so much more. It's what I personally use in my own studio, and it's no surprise why it's the leading studio management software. What I think really makes My Music Staff stand out is its community-driven development and personal approach to customer support. It was such a pleasant surprise jumping into My Music Staff for the first time and realizing how in tune it was with my business and the ins and outs of a music studio. Since they partner with the music community to develop their software, they've been able to anticipate what teachers need and are constantly improving their software to exceed expectations. And a more recent example of responding to community feedback was the addition of a very popular feature, streaming video and audio files directly within the My Music Staff app. And that means that no longer do you have to download files to your device. So it makes it incredibly easy to share content with your students. My Music Staff is super easy to get up and running. The transition away from paper and spreadsheets is painless. If you do need help, the quality of support is second to none, and you'll always get a fully personalised response. I have yet to see the level of attention and care I receive from My Music Staff provided by any other software platforms I use, and I use a lot of software in my business. So what have you got to lose? Just go to mymusicstaff.com and sign up for their free 30-day trial today. On protection from policies, Heidi Marie again actually says, one of my policies related to safety states, although I put down salt, please be careful on the walkway and steps in winter. In the event that a student falls and breaks an arm, do I have protection because they have signed that studio policy outlining what measures I take?
Not absolute, but it gives you leverage in the argument. If you get into a trial, if they're trying to claim something crazy, you can go in there and say, look, we had the sign up, you blow it up. It's a big platform thing, in front of the jury, and they carry it into the jury room. And there's a certain aspect, all the horrible things you hear about juries, they're usually pretty rare. Most juries, it comes down to common sense. And if you sign something saying, that, I put salt down, but you can still slip, can they recover? Sure. What are they going to recover? It's nominal. It's you definitely want them. Let's put it that way. Is it an absolute cure for you? No. Get insurance.
Right. And that's the same for any contract or policy document, I would say. It can never be 100% rock solid. You are protected, right?
No, absolutely. Well, in certain cases it can. If it's just a strange claim, if somebody sues you claiming you're an alien, obviously that.
Okay.
The way we've had it work in cases is it has actually worked. I used to represent a utility company in San Diego, and I was doing a lot of trial work, and we had somebody that made really egregious claims. They were actually hurt in an accident, and they were just demanding so much money that we weren't going to settle. There was just no way. And so we went to trial. The whole purpose of going to trial wasn't to get out of liability. It was just to get a lower number. Okay, the jury's going to find us liable, but they're not going to go for $30 million because this guy broke his ankle. Come on. And, and we went forward, and their attorney was just so out of control as well that the jury actually came back with a defense verdict just because they were so outlandish and making so many wild claims. And we did. We had a disclaimer like that. When you work on our sites, there's going to be, holes dug, watch out where you walk, that kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. Is it legally, great? No. But in that situation, you never know what the other side is going to do. If they make a complete ass out of themselves, well, maybe you walk away.
Yep. And one more on policies. One teacher asked, should we include language about injury to the human body through incorrect practice or other habits outside playing the piano that contribute to how we feel at the piano? I read an article last year that someone was suing a teacher because the student became injured and could no longer continue in their college program.
I would, yes. Why wouldn't you? What's the downside? The other thing that you should be including is a clear statement of expected outcome. Yes, I am a great musical teacher. No, you will not be the next, classical music, the next Bach or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You need that kind of language in there because people, some have unreasonable expectations. Some are jerks. And, there's just a variety of different potential claims that you face. Now, whenever I do one of these things, I always get worried that people get so petrified, by the end of it, that they think that, the end is near.
The
A lot of
apocalypse is
these,
coming.
yeah, exactly. Great fire in the sky.
Yeah.
A lot of these things are never going to happen to you. What we're doing is we're planning for the worst. Okay. And if your attorney, if you do this and, the worst happens, you get sued, and your attorney sees that we have all these different things that we can leverage them with, if nothing else. Maybe we can get out of it completely. So you're basically you're trying to tilt the battlefield in your favor. Now, for most of you, nothing's ever going to happen. Okay. We're just planning for the worst case. So don't get freaked out by this stuff. It's a to-do list kind of item. These are the kind of things that you want to do. Do you want terms? Absolutely, you want them. That's very, very important. Do you need to comply with the privacy stuff? Sure, absolutely. What about your teachers out there? Yeah, you want to do all these things, but this isn't like stare, at the ceiling all night, petrified, and you can't get any sleep kind of material. Right. Just talk to an attorney in your area. Most of us don't bite. Some do, but most of us don't. And, we'll be happy to walk you through it. We even create a list. Here's the things that you need, and you can prioritize them. And I have a budget. Here's what I'll pay for. Let's do this first, that kind of thing.
And just as an aside, teachers will easily be able to Google, privacy policy templates and things like that. I'm pretty sure I know what your answer will be here. Are they of any value?
I'll be honest. 10 years ago, they did, because privacy was a non-issue, quite frankly. Now, no. Now you need them custom done, unfortunately.
Right.
Because you really need to figure out. You need to look at your traffic. You need to figure out, where your risks were. You were talking about earlier, if you're in the U.S. and you're teaching just students in the U.S., do you just need to comply with the U.S. policies? If that's the case, then it was pretty easy, and you could probably still do that. But starting on January 1st, 2020, my fine state, California, is enacting a law that's essentially the GDPR light that will kind of become the standard law in the U.S. So we're going to see something similar arise in the U.S.,
right?
At which point everybody will learn to hate privacy. The problem with these things is they're meant well, but it's kind of like the warning thing on your mattress. In the EU, we're already seeing complaints from consumers because every website they go to, there's pop-ups and everything, and they have to agree to different things. And I'm sure everybody sees the cookie notice on the bottom. Does anybody even read it anymore? Just click it, get out of the way. Get out of the way. I want to see my kitten video, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so it really doesn't, what effect does it really have? But apologies for the rant.
No, it's all good. I remember when I first hired an attorney to do my terms and conditions for my membership and also my main website and my privacy policy. And I've now since used her for a number of subsequent things, like when I hire someone to help create something for me and things like that. And I must say that when I read through them, it always surprises me the number of things that she thinks of or knows about that I would never have thought if I tried to write it myself to put in there. And of course, you, as a lawyer, structure it in a way that makes it quite watertight, I guess, if it was ever taken to a court situation. So I fully agree with Richard. While it is an expense, it might be $500, it might be $1,000. It is 100% worth it for one, peace of mind, and two, obviously the actual legal protection. Now we've got maybe 2 or 3 last questions. We could probably go on for even longer, but I know I try and stick to about an hour for these. So Nicole asks, and this has come up a lot actually, and it's about protecting ourselves in the situation of a claim of maltreatment or something in a lesson going on. So she says, because we teach private lessons to minors and there isn't always a parent in the room, what would you advise to protect us from claims? I have considered videotaping lessons for this reason, in which case I would have them sign a form stating that they are aware of this being recorded. Any other suggestions?
Unfortunately, I think the videotape idea is kind of where we're at these days. You want to be absolutely sure because, obviously these claims, regardless of the merits of them, just the claim itself is going to have an obviously horrible effect on your life. Unfortunately, there are quite a few laws regarding videotaping these days, not in this vernacular, but more in the sense of people, taping other people in private areas without their consent. So you definitely want to talk to a lawyer in your area to put this together. But yes, absolutely, I would go ahead and do it. The problem that we're quickly approaching is, with your policies, They're going to include disclaimers and all these things. And after a while, the thing's a small phone book, and how do you get clients to sign it? Because after a while, they're going to be like, well, so what are you going to be doing with my kid?
Yeah.
It's 23 pages long, and they need you need a thumbprint or something. But yeah, this area, I would definitely do it, because the negative outcome, even though, again, very unlikely to happen to you, but if it does, man, you really want to make sure you get yourself covered, because if it becomes a he said, she said, and that's a tough situation. But if you have a videotape, well, game, set, match.
Yeah, that's true. It's sad that we have to talk about it, but I think it's really good that Nicole brought it up, because I have heard it asked a lot in other forums too. And I know that myself, teaching in schools, there's always a requirement that doors have windows in them, and doors, you never should be behind a closed door with one-on-one with a student. That, of course, becomes very difficult, which is hence the question here. So, but I think, if there's any way in your space or your studio, if you're working for a school, that you can have windows so people can see what's going on in there, I think that is also a good thing to do if it's at all possible. Because I know setting up videotaping and recording is, it's just another expense as well.
It is, but maybe even with, just iPhones or anything, the video doesn't have to be that great. I will tell you, having dealt with some of these situations on behalf of some of my business clients who were accused of that as, part of their business. This was actually before the internet. Those were my corporate clients. Taking every possible step is highly advisable, because once that allegation is made, even if it's made in private, everybody finds out, and it doesn't matter how innocent you are. Your reputation is dust. We're talking time to move, get a new name. It is devastating.
Right.
And so hopefully nobody listening has experienced it. But yeah, this would be one area where you want to be paranoid. You want to make sure you take every step possible to protect yourself. And again, the police and these groups, their job is to investigate, but they're also looking for, convictions. And if you have a video and your lawyer walks forward and slaps the video down on the table and says, let's grab some chips and watch this, that's your saving grace, if you will.
Right.
And that's objective. It's not subjective. It is objective. And I know we all think highly of the police, but there are certain parts of the country in the U.S. where the police get on the stand and the attorneys refer to it as testifying. Because they know exactly what they need to say. There have been cases in San Diego where people have been put away for child molestation that was subsequently proved not to be the case.
Yeah.
And those people's lives are done.
Yeah. As I say, it's hard to talk about. It's annoying that we do have to talk about it, but I'm really glad we did bring up that question. So thank you, Nicole, for reminding me about that one. And yes, might be the kind of thing that we can talk more about in our discussions online with members and people who are listening to this about approaches that they can take. Because I'm sure there'll be some savvy companies out there who've created discrete recording devices. Of course, you need to let your parents and their students know that this is happening, but that would store information for a set time, and you don't have to worry about it transferring it to computers and things like that. So I don't know if it's out there, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I gotta go. I got a business idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got to invest. All right, last question from Wendy, and thank you so much, Richard. It's been really helpful to go through these. So Wendy says her question is whether or not to approach relevant counsel to seek approval to teach from home. I'd love to think I am okay without paying counsel fees. I have music teacher insurance, but also wonder if a claim was ever made. Would the fact that I did not seek counsel approval affect anything? And of course, that will come down to reading your insurance policy. But as a general thing, what do you say?
This is going to be very location dependent. In the U.S., it would come down to states. And in the state, in California, yes, it would have an effect. But in other states, I'm pretty sure it would not. You'd really have to check with local counsel. The problem is that states try to protect themselves, not so much from a legal side, but they're trying to collect taxes. And so, if you don't pay whatever it is you're supposed to pay, even if it's a middling little fee, they will often take away some of your rights. So in California, for instance, if you're a corporation in another state and you do business here, even if it's just once, you sell one thing to one customer, and a lawsuit arises from that. If you're not registered here and have paid up all your fees, you cannot defend that lawsuit.
Oh,
you have no defense.
You got to register. If you were selling things online, then you've got to register in every state.
Which nobody does, of course. But the thing of it is, and this gives you an idea behind the law. If that happens, what's your solution? Well, you send in a check paying for your fees, and then suddenly you can defend yourself.
Right. Okay.
So it's not about justice or anything of that sort. It's just, we want money. Give us
Right.
money. Give us
Gotcha.
money. You gave us money. Hey, great. Knock yourself out.
Right.
Welcome to the California legal system. Now, other states aren't as nearly as cynical as that. California is one of the worst. New York, Illinois, they're also terrible. If you're in a place like Colorado, there's probably nothing like that. So again, you're going to want to talk to somebody local. If you're talking, councils, you're probably talking somewhere, I don't know, Australia, the EU, and they may have completely different rules, but it is something you're going to have to look at on a local level.
Yeah. And I guess the thinking is, well, if I don't ask, then I can kind of claim ignorance or whatever. But I guess, to do the right thing, we should ask the council. I mean, that's the simplest way to get approval, I guess.
I will tell you, in California, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've defended a lot of cases, and I've never had somebody assert that.
Right.
In fact, I've never had anybody really even look at it, as far as I know. Now that I think about it, but that's obviously not the answer. You might be the lucky person who runs smack dab into it.
I would imagine too that if you're teaching from home in a busy, crowded street and you're having groups of 10 kids at a time, and the parking's a nightmare, and you're upsetting all your neighbours, then that's the kind of time that claims are going to be like, people are going to whinge and complain to council, and then they're going to come knocking on your door. But perhaps if you've got 5 students and they're very spread out and it's a very small thing, then, that's a different kind of approach, I guess. So, but again, get your legal advice.
Well, just make sure the parents are bringing them, because otherwise, maybe the FBI that's coming to your door.
Let's hope not. So, Richard, look, thanks so much for that conversation. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you've been thinking, oh, yeah, music teachers always get this wrong, or small businesses, I keep seeing this problem and we haven't talked about it?
Not offhand. I would just think, if you're in the US or the EU, really pay attention to privacy. Unfortunately, it's just the area where I refer to it as the Empire Strikes Back at this point. We went through the wild, wild west of the internet, in the early 2000s. And unfortunately, that age is kind of dying. We have a concept called the splinter net, which is really appearing online. So if you're teaching a particular location, you need to know, what the rules are, particularly if you're getting, those policies approved online, because once you start collecting information online, you trigger these laws. And the important thing to understand is, when we talk about personal information, if you're a normal human being, you're thinking of things like name, address, email address, maybe a phone number. But under the GDPR and under general privacy law, we're talking about things like IP address, geolocation. So if somebody comes to your site, the reason you're seeing those cookie pop-ups is as soon as they hit your site, well, your server is recording their IP address. Mm-hmm. That's just part of your analytics. Okay, well, technically, that all violates the GDPR.
Right.
Because you have to have a legal basis and consent before you can collect that information. Now, nobody does. And the people who wrote the GDPR don't really know how the internet works. They just pass these kind of strange things. So you want to keep an eye on that. Now, as teachers of music, I don't think the enforcement agencies in Europe are going after big music. I mean, they're going to look at Google and Facebook and these groups first. But you want to keep an eye on this, because in maybe 5 or 10 years, they're going to start drilling down towards a lot of the smaller providers. So make sure that you watch that. And again, if you have children that are under 16 as students, particularly in the EU, GDPR you want to look at. If it's under 13 in the US, COPA you definitely want to look at. Australia, I don't know. I'm sure they have some kind of similar. I have no idea what the age is, but you want to be careful with that stuff.
Yep. Very, very helpful. Thank you again. I've just had a look back through my notes. There was one thing we did talk about, which we haven't covered in detail, which was the DMCA. But I'm not sure if it's actually that likely to be that relevant for teachers running studios. What do you think?
I think if you're running studios, probably not. But if you're running a website where you're allowing people to post anything, or if you are selling courses, I think we were talking about it in the situation where she was selling courses. And in that situation, it is helpful. Just a real quick rundown. The DMCA is a Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's a federal law in the United States, and it applies to copyright issues online, as the name suggests. And so basically, if somebody steals your course and they upload it onto another website, you can go to that website. Really what you want to do is pull their domain up, do a whois search, and you'll be able to identify their host. And then you contact their host and you say, hey, this guy's reselling my course, what the hey? And they will take it down, basically, is the short and sweet of it. It's an obvious black hat situation. Unfortunately, there's some sites out there that are hosted in, China and these kinds of places where it's not going to work. But in a lot of cases, it will. And the reason is all these groups want to tap the U.S. market. There's a big consumer market here. It can be quite lucrative, so they don't want to get shut out. So the host in particular will be very careful about those. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. Again, probably want to talk to somebody, or you can even just read up online. There's a book online called the DMCA Handbook. I'm not sure it's still in print, but if not, if you do a search for DMCA takedown notice or DMCA compliance process, tons of articles are written on it. It's not very complex, but it can help you if your stuff gets stolen online.
Fantastic. Brilliant. So look, I'm sure there are going to be people listening who go thinking, I really need to speak to Richard and get some advice. So how can people find out more about you and get in contact with you?
Sure. You can always find me on my website, which is SoCal, like Southern California, SoCalInternetLawyer.com. I'm also on LinkedIn all the time, Richard Chapo. No, I'm not the drug lord, and I'm not related to him. Although sometimes I wish I was, kind of the finance. But the irony is I live right on the border of Mexico, so I'm always wary about getting shot by somebody who thinks I'm him. But nonetheless, you can get me through those two sources. I have a YouTube channel as well that I started out only after 13 years of YouTube existing. That's efficiency for you. Nice.
I haven't checked that one out myself.
Yes. Well, its first videos are horrible, but it's rather
with all of us. So SoCalInternetLawyer.com.
Yes, it's interesting. I find there's nobody to talk to in the video, and so from my eyes start staring around the room like there's some horror creature about to jump out. I don't know, it's bizarre, but anyways, it's enjoyable. So,
get used to it the more you do it.
Hopefully, because yes, the first ones it's like yikes, boy, that's horrible. But anyways, get me through those, and mention Tim, and I'll certainly talk to you for free, give you a free consult.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much, Richard. Really appreciate your time today. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. We're hoping for snow, so let's go see if it comes down.
Catch you soon.
All righty.
So what did you think of those questions and answers? I must say that ensuring protection in one-on-one teaching in our homes using video was not something that I'd personally contemplated or thought much about, although I had heard other teachers talking about it, and I can certainly see the merits. So if this kind of episode is useful to you and perhaps you would like your own questions answered, or maybe some of the answers and questions have brought up more questions for you, then I would love to know if you'd like me to get Richard back on the show for another session. And if that's the case, then please shoot me a message either in the forums, on social, or on the show notes page at timtopham.com/episode 154. Now, next week on the show, I'm doing something very, very different, and you're actually not going to hear my voice at all. I'm handing the show over to one of my team members, someone who you'll very much know if you've been following me and my work and you keep in touch with people online. I'm not going to tell you who it is. I'm going to leave it all to that person to take over next week, and I'll see you back again in episode number 156. Have fun. I'm Tim Topham, and this is the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Just before you go, if you've enjoyed today's show, I'd love for you to check out my Inner Circle piano teaching community. It's the go-to resource for piano teachers looking to continue their professional development, connect with other teachers and experts around the world, and to access hundreds of world-class training resources, including our academy courses, lesson plans, teaching videos, technology help, and much more. Whether you're just starting out or have been working hard to build your studio for a while, the Inner Circle community will give you the skills, support, and confidence you need to grow the studio of your dreams. Whether that's just about teaching a small number of students one-on-one in your home, or about hiring a commercial space, employing other teachers, and building an entire music teaching empire. With courses on both the teaching and business side of running your studio, live coaching, and our thriving community forums, you can get quick answers to questions, set yourself challenges, get feedback on your ideas, and feel confident teaching in new and exciting ways. For more info and how to join us inside the circle, head over to timtopham.com/community today. I'll see you on the inside.
Will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Creative Piano Teaching Podcast. We'd love to help take your teaching to the next level as a member of our supportive community. Use the coupon Piano Podcast for $100 off an annual membership of Tim's Inner Circle today. To find out more, head to timtopham.com/community.